Miriam Cates, the MP who wrote this piece in the paper yesterday, Conservative MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge, joins me now. Thanks for coming on. Do you sense that your colleague George Eustace is onto something? It's almost a derogatory term. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Yes, I think he's right. And this idea of stay-at-home mum conjures up this 1950s vision of a woman in an apron sitting, drinking tea while children play around her. And of course, that is not what it is about at all. I was a stay-at-home mum for quite a few years. And of course, yes, you're based at home, but stay-at-home mums spend a lot of time in play groups, taking their children all over the place, volunteering, joining the PTA, all sorts of really valuable volunteering exercises outside the home, as well as, of course, the very vital job of providing that stability and that love for their children. And I think no one's wanting to go back to this kind of idyllic model of the 1950s, but I think we have to question, is motherhood only valuable when the mother is going out to work and contributing to GDP? And that is what this new policy suggests.
How should a new mum, a young mum, decide? How should she think, yes, I'm going to stay at home with baby or babies, or I know I'm going to go into the workplace and try and work out childcare? Miriam.
Well, this is the problem at the moment. For most women, they have no choice. And the reason for that is that, unlike in previous generations, it's almost impossible for most people to survive on just one income. And so couples have two incomes until the child is born. And then perhaps you get 6 months of generous maternity pay if you're lucky. And then after that, you're at a cliff edge and you don't know what to do because you cannot survive on one income. Now, the Chancellor seems to think, and I understand this argument, that it's because childcare is too expensive. But I don't agree that that's the right analysis. And actually, childcare isn't any particularly more expensive in this country. The issue is about
lots of people are shouting at you on the radio now, don't you?
They are, but I do. But it's worth looking into the figures, and at the risk of boring your listeners at breakfast time, the issue is that British childcare is more expensive as a proportion of people's net income, and the reason for that is that we take so much tax off families compared to other countries. Yeah. This is the issue here, that we don't treat households, families, as a tax unit. We tax individuals, and that's what penalises families and creates this problem. And it's not the case in France and Germany and the States. And I could talk about tax for a long time, and I'm sure you don't want me to. But essentially, our tax system does not value raising children. That's the problem, and that's why families are penalised.
So as you work your way up to being Minister and then Secretary of State, what would you seek to bring about in both this area and, I would imagine, to value stay-at-home mums? Miriam.
Well, I think it's all about choice, and different things work differently for different families. And the problem with this 38-hour childcare offer is it's completely inflexible, and it only supports you if you want to put your 9-month-old in the care of strangers or in nursery, many of whom do a brilliant job. I would make it about choice. Take that £4 billion, that's £6,500 per child that the Chancellor's willing to spend, and give it to parents to use as they see fit. That might be paying granny to look after children. That might be using formal childcare.
Sorry, how are you going to pay? What you're going to give them? How are you going to pay granny? Just so I can work that out.
So you could do it. There's a variety of ways you could do it. You could make the voucher scheme more flexible, or you could do it through tax credits or through the benefit system like they do in other countries. So essentially, take less money away from parents to start with, so that they have more choice. But back in the 1980s, you got a tax credit for each and every child you had, which basically put more money in your pocket. So there are a variety of ways you could do this, but essentially what you want is choice, so that each family can decide how to use that additional income or cash or vouchers or whatever you want to call it. And one of those choices is to spend more time with your children and less time in the workplace. And I don't see why that should be seen as an inferior choice if that's what people want.
Lastly, in your piece, you reference that you're an MP, but you're also a mum. Without prying, do you mind if I ask how you managed it and what your decision-making was?
Well, it was very challenging financially, and I went back. I was a science teacher, and I went back for 2 days a week after having my first child, and again after the second. But after a year of that, I realised that actually I wanted to spend more time investing in the kids, and so I took a career break. And it, challenging financially, yes, but how rewarding! I mean, I'm so glad I had that time with them. Those early years are so precious, and it wasn't just being at home; it was volunteering and doing all sorts of other things.
But
as well.
Again, people are shouting at you. well, you were jolly lucky your husband or partner or boyfriend or whatever was making that kind of money. She doesn't realise, I can't afford to do that, I have to go out and... Sorry, go on.
This is exactly the problem. I was incredibly fortunate that we could just about manage it, and part of that was my parents' help with free help.
Right.
We were very fortunate, but this is my point. Why should only relatively wealthy people have the choice to spend time with their children? Everybody should have that choice, because that investment in the early years pays dividends in the child's later life.
Really enjoyed our conversation. Check out Miriam Cates's piece online. I'm sure it's available from yesterday's